Vanessa Tyler on the Black Information Network. We're reporting from the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual legislative conference, and we are honored to be here with Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. Secretary, I know you've been out speaking on behalf of the Vice President, and I just wanted to get your reaction quickly to the fact that there will be no second debate, so they say right now.
Well, appearing in this capacity, I can't speak about the campaign and election side of things, but what I will say is I've also been out on behalf of the Biden-Harris administration, being able to go to community after community that is getting a new project, a new benefit, new jobs, big things happening because of the leadership of President Biden and Vice President Harris. I have seen the role that she has played in making it possible for us to have this infrastructure bill that's bringing funding to literally every state and territory in the country, and in making sure that that actually is implemented well. It's one thing to have the money going out on paper. It's another to make sure that communities, including communities that have been overlooked or underserved in the past, are getting the investment they deserve, and that there are the job opportunities being created to participate in that work. And that's been really exciting, especially over the last few months as more and more of these projects go into their construction phase.
Oh, Secretary Buttigieg, let's just talk transportation then. Many of us in this hall will be leaving by plane probably Sunday morning. There are a lot of concerning things happening at airports. I mean, there were a couple of collisions. Of course, we all remember the door that fell out of an airplane. What about air travel and air travel safety at this point? There are just too many stories to tell about things happening at airports and on the ground and in the air.
Well, this is why the FAA is taking such an intensive approach on safety. Remember, flying on an airliner in the United States is by far the safest way to travel. It's safer than getting in a car. It's safer than literally sitting here in this building, actually, statistically.
Right.
The challenge is how do you keep it that way and make sure that there continues to be response, not just if the worst happens, but anytime there's a close call. We take the same approach to investigating a close call that 20 years ago would have been the approach to investing an actual crash. And the point is to make sure that a close call doesn't turn into a crash. The only acceptable number of aviation fatalities is 0. And what we're working to do is to maintain that standard, which is why we put Boeing under a microscope over some of those quality issues, and are investing in things like changing the way our airports are configured. We know things now about how to design a taxiway, for example, that weren't really in play 30 years ago or 40 years ago. To make it impossible for there to even be the possibility of an airplane being in the wrong place when another airplane is crossing over. Each one of those steps adds up into a safer airspace. It does cost money, but I would argue that is money well spent so that we can maintain our leadership as the safest, most complex airspace in the world.
I tell you, looking at airports today, they're massive. All the new construction and, they're like inside malls almost, some of these places. They're just massive.
Yeah, you could think of them as some of the cathedrals of American infrastructure, but, some of them are showing their age, too. One of the reasons I'm proud of the Biden-Harris infrastructure package is it contains dollars to make our airports better, whether it's something like the new concourse going in at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport in Atlanta, or something that maybe is a little more behind the scenes, a new power plant for the airport in Dallas, or a rural airport in South Dakota that most people have never heard of, but it matters to the people who live in that area because without it, they can't get the flights that carry medical patients to the nearest hospital. Also, importantly, there's a lot of good paying jobs and work that goes on both with the airport concessions and the construction. I met a new generation of black business owners who are in the construction industry in Atlanta at businesses that started a generation ago. It was some of the work to build Hartsfield-Jackson to the airport that it is in the first place under Mayor Maynard Jackson. It is so inspiring to see that now there's a second or even third generation creating jobs, creating opportunity, building up that middle class, often in black communities, because we have been intentional about that opportunity that comes with the economic engine that our airports represent.
Speaking of black communities and certainly building up the infrastructure there, they have always been left behind. The roads, especially sometimes in the rural areas, are not built up. So that is all part of this infrastructure, getting the money to repave and rebuild that.
That's right. We're doing 60,000 projects and counting. Project getting some benefit from the infrastructure package. Often the ones that will get the most coverage are the ones with the biggest price tag. Something like the Frederick Douglass Tunnel that's replacing a 150-year-old railroad tunnel in Baltimore. Obviously, that's vitally important, but often there will be a small off-system bridge that is not nationally known, but is critically important for the people who count on it every day. And if that bridge is unavailable, sometimes we have a bridge that's gotten into such poor condition that they can't allow trucks or school buses or ambulances to use it because they're too heavy. That means people have to drive 20 or 30 miles out of their way. It even plays a role in grocery prices because when you have bridges in poor condition, then truck deliveries take longer and shipping prices are part of the price of bacon and eggs that we buy at the grocery. So all of these things are connected and all of these things are benefiting from the dollars we are putting into fixing the bridges, improving the roads, things like transit, and rail, making a big difference across the country.
And not too far from here, we have the Francis Scott Key Bridge. How is that project going?
We have been moving heaven and earth based on the marching orders we got from President Biden, which is to make sure that we do everything we can federally to support the people of Baltimore. Step one, of course, was to get the wreckage of that bridge out of the harbor so that the port could be operating. At a lot of dock workers who, if the ships aren't coming, they're not working. If they're not working, they're not getting paid. The Army Corps of Engineers worked in record time to clear that wreckage. Now we have that port back up and running. But now that the port is back to normal, the question of getting the bridge restored is a multi-year project. The original bridge took 5 years to build. I think we can beat that for the new bridge, but we're going to design it differently than the last time around. And we're going to keep the promise that President Biden made to Governor Wes Moore of Maryland, to Mayor Scott in Baltimore, and to the whole community, that we're going to be there every step of the way to support Maryland in rebuilding that bridge better than ever.
Excellent. Any big projects? I know you mentioned one. Any other big projects coming up?
One thing I'm excited about this week is the Safe Streets for All grants. About 350 communities around the country are getting federal funding to make safety improvements. Places like Center Street in Milwaukee, which has needed support for a long time, redesigning the streets so there are fewer crashes there. This is something that Mayor Cavalier Johnson talked to me about when I was in Milwaukee recently. And that's just one of the hundreds of communities getting a benefit through this program today. So again, sometimes you're going to hear about these billion-dollar projects, but sometimes it's something a little closer to home that will make the biggest difference to residents because it can literally save lives when we have better, smoother, smarter street designs for people to count on every day.
Excellent. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, thank you so much for joining us here at the Black Information Network.
Thank you for having me on.